It's been 2 months since I last did one of these sessions, so sorry about that, folks. It has been a bit busy, and also we are weak. Do you know, I honestly don't fucking care of COVID, lockdown, crap, bollocks. Thank you very much. Anyway, let's not talk about political bollocks. Let's enjoy some. This one is a Ringwood Brewery Razorback, exceptionally refreshing amber craft ale, 3.6. It's a session ale, kind of like a bit more of a skittle ale, my dad calls them, in my antique Watney's special bitter beer glass. Let's try this. Oh, that's nice. Oh, that is nice. Anyway, how are you? Oh, I'm living the dream, me. Got a busy calendar now. I've been trying to shift all of the small project work out of the way, which I've largely done now. There's one project in the beginning of October where I'm going to go and liberate a engine and gearbox out of a B-suffix Range Rover and put them into another B-suffix Range Rover, because one's a parts car and one is a project car. And in exchange for my services and my heavy lifting skills, I'm going to liberate some further parts from the parts car for Bob, whose chassis you can see lurking in the background over there. And then pretty much it's going to be a straight run through to Christmas doing nothing but Bob. There are a couple of other little jobs I need to do on my dad's car, and that needs to be painted too. But really I want to be putting the bulk of my effort now into Bob. So that's me. Nice to have, you know, a schedule that's filling up. It's nice to see that people are loving their classic cars. I've broken the stag. My little bodge fix that I put into the gearbox to plug up the blind hole, because I've got a TR6 or 25PI diff and a stag backplate. Two of the bowl holes don't line up, so I used a bit of liquid metal and wedged it into the hole. Nobody shat it out yesterday. The diff's run dry, so I'm a bit pissed off about that. But it just means I've got to take the diff off again. It's only half an hour to get the thing off. Anyway, so what I've been doing in 2 months, I have had a number of questions which people have sent over to me. It's in my trusty old book of joy and wonderment. It's not blue. And I got a load of questions I wrote down in here, which I might even be able to find them if I'm clever. This is quite a while ago, because I started writing all this stuff down. And I might have to just edit this bit out, or speed through it. Fuck's sake. Dave Murray. Did I put it at the back, perhaps? Well, it ain't there. Let's turn the book the other way up. Oh, here we are. It's at the back. Turn the book upside down. Right, so I've had a selection of questions come through, and some I'm not going to answer, I'm afraid. There's some very odd people out there, there really is. That's all I'm going to say there. So, some of these questions I'm going to answer in the spirit in which they were asked. Why do you drive shit old cars? Well, because I can fix them. Why would you want to drive something brand new when you can drive something old with a lot more character? So I could, I don't know. I don't think they're shit anyway. Shonky? Yes. Shit? No. I've always driven cars. No, I haven't always driven cars. I've had, you know, things like Mondeos and things which are getting collectible now. I had a Mark 1 Mondeo. I had a Mark 2 Golf GTI. I had a Mark II Cavalier 1.6L. Those are they're the only modern cars I've ever had. I mean, the wife's had a lot more modern cars and, you know, family cars and things like that. We've had various Citroens. We had a Citroen Picasso, which was, well, a lot of people will say, shit. No, honestly, it was the best car in the world for us at the time with 3 sons, age 2 or under. It was outstanding. And we did a load of mileage in that. My wife put a dent in every single panel on that car over the 3 or 4 years we owned it. And we did an enormous amount of mileage. It never let us down. And then we got a C4 Grand Picasso, which did nothing but let us down. Yeah, we learned about things like that. Now she drives a little Hyundai i10. So you can see there's a trend developing of driving shonky old cars. Even my kids drive shonky old cars. So Matthew had a Peugeot 309, two-door, which was 2001. Louis got a Renault Clio, 2002 Renault Clio, and Davey, my middle son, has got a 2002 VW Polo. It's the 9N model. So yeah, we all drive shonky cars because I can fix them. And I can't fix something like a brand spanking new car because I'm not a computer wizard or into witchcraft. There you go. Shonky old cars. So why do I drive shonky old cars? Because I can fix them. I think that's fair, don't you? I do. What do you think of the new Jaguar Land Rover range? Well, I'm assuming you mean the Land Rover range rather than just the Range Rover range. Well, people love them. I can't think of anything on the new. I'm tempted to look at a Defender, but I'd never buy one. The new Defender. It's just far too complicated. Did I just say fart? No, I said far too, not fart. Okay, I think that the range is too complicated. I think if you go back to the early 1970s, when I was indeed alive, I was alive in the late 60s. I think if you go back to the early 70s, you had 3 or 4 cars in the range. If you look at the normal stuff that was available to consumers, you had an 88-inch Land Rover, you had a 109-inch Land Rover, you had a full control Land Rover, and you had a Range Rover. And that was it. Now we've got the Evoque, the Velar, the Sport, the big boy Range Rover, the big boy Disco that looks like a double-decker bus that's had a stroke, Disco Sport, and I think the Disco Sport is a replacement for the Freelander now. And then you've got the Defender, short and long wheelbase, and about 1 million different engine options, all of which are diesel, apart from the petrol ones. And I think there's a hybrid in there as well. It's too complicated. The range is too big, folks. Sorry. Limit the range. It's like when you go into a pub restaurant. You go to a pub and the menu's like 8 pages long. You know it's all coming out of the bloody freezer. Whereas there's like 3 items on the menu, you're going to choose a lot quicker. And you know the food's freshly prepared. I don't know what that means about Jaguar Land Rover's range, but I think there's too many things in the Jaguar Land Rover range. What do I think about it? I think they're doing nice work. I think as far as maintaining the brand name of Range Rover, it's doing really well. I'm not entirely convinced yet about Defender. I think time will tell. If, you know, typical British automotive electronics come anywhere near that car, and you're in Outer Mongolia, I'm kind of thinking you're fucked. That was rude, wasn't it, Richard? No, if I was going to go touring across Asia, would I take a Series 3 diesel long wheelbase, or would I take the new Defender? It's going to be the Series 3, because you can run it on goat's piss and fix it with a hammer. I don't think you could do that with the new Defender. Anyway, I don't think it's a bad range. I think it's of its time. I think that the cars are, you know, people are buying them. You see them on the road and you think, yep, that's a Land Rover, because they've got a brand identity. So I think they're doing well there. I've just got no real desire to own anything new. I don't think they're doing anything particularly wrong, although they've been stitched up by the government. I'm not going to get political about Dieselgate. So having invested heavily in making diesels as efficient and as clean as they possibly can, the government's now said, diesel's evil. Or have they? I don't know. I might have made that bit up. Right, should I buy a P38? Well, this is where you need to use your head and you need to use your heart. So my heart would say yes, and my head would say yes. And I'm going to buy one? No. I'm honestly, my balls ain't that big. I'm quite happy to do Range Rover Classics. I think when it comes to the P38, they are starting to creep up in value now. So I think the days of, you know, the £500 MOT'd, engine failed P38, they're gone. I think the market has thinned out somewhat. The supply has thinned out somewhat, in that the cars that have slip liners, have dodgy, you know, 4 litre or 4.6 litre engines, have died. The diesel versions that have been chipped to back and beyond, with their owners claiming they get 600 miles to the gallon out of them, have all died of gearbox failure. And I think what's left now are actually the genuinely quite tidy cars, and because of that we're seeing the prices creeping up a little bit. There are still wrecks out there available for dirt cheap, and I am tempted to get a wreck. In fact, Stuart up at the pub that I bought Sandy the Landy from, stop Richard. He's got two. He's got one, the screen's been out, and it's been standing in a field. Yeah, I don't want that one, Stuart. Honestly, that's worth its weight in scrap. And he's got another, which is un-MOT'd, 4.6 V8. And it hasn't got an MOT. And I said, without an MOT on that, Stuart, 500 quid. Oh, the other thing is he's converted it from air to springs. And if you're going to have a P38, it's got to be on air. It's quite a complicated system, but you can fix it with a bloody hammer. Unlike the HVAC and... Sorry, HVAC. Unlike the internal ventilation systems, the audio systems, and the general ECU management of the engine, which can't be fixed with a hammer. You need some very, very expensive trickery to do that. I'm very, very tempted to go down the route of a P38, but not enough to buy one. There's more things that I kind of quite like to have a look at. That was gross, sorry. I've been having messed around with James's TR7s. I've kind of got an itch for a TR7. Having fixed my Stag and then broken it, I want to drive the Stag more. And I just don't think right now there's room in my life for a P38. Of course, by the time there is room in my life for a P38, there'll all be gazillions of pounds. Should I buy a P38? Yes, I should, but no, I won't. What car do you wish you'd owned? Now, that's a cracker. I can tell you which car I'd never sold, and that was in a previous Beer and Bollocks session. That was the Anglia. I should never have sold that car. So cars I wish I'd owned, and these are cars that were probably affordable, and now are somewhat out of my grasp, out of my reach. There's a few cars. First and foremost, there was the, it's an S-Class Merchant. I think it was a 450 SEL 6.9 that was owned by James Hunt. I think it was his second one that he owned. And that was up for sale at Slade's Garage in Penn, very near where I live, at home, not Devon, up in Buckinghamshire. And at the time, and this goes back a fair few years now, so it's just after I met my missus, just after we got married, so we're talking 23, 24 years ago. That car was up for 9 grand, and my Stag was worth about 9 grand, and we were very, very, very close to doing a straight swap. I just think, you know, my brother's friend Jerry used to live in Wimbledon with his parents, and they lived just up the road from James Hunt. They remember this car standing on blocks outside his house. I just thought, you know, we've got this current trend of Formula One drivers. Okay, Kimi Räikkönen is in a world of his own. I salute you, sir, if you're watching, if you are. Cheers, old chap. But, you know, James Hunt, Nigel Mansell to a certain extent, Eddie Irvine, they were racers. They really were. I've got nothing wrong with the current generation of racing, but it's got too commercial, it's got too much of a business. To me, it's not exciting anymore. I'd rather watch the MotoGP. Nutters. So what car do you wish you'd owned? It would have been that 450 SEL 6.9 hot rod. Mercedes saloon that James Hunt had owned briefly, and I think really it's not so much the car, although that really does add something to it. It was the fact that James Hunt had sat in the seat and the boot was full of his pornography. Probably wasn't still, but anyway, it was just, the man was a legend, is a legend. Okay, so that's my car I wish I'd owned. There's quite a few cars that I've seen over the years and thought, do you know what, I quite fancy them. Back when the coupe Jaguars of the XJ6 and 12Cs were around, again, I nearly sold my Stag to buy an XJ12C, and again that was more or less a straight swap. But every time I drive my Stag to go and see one of these cars, I think, do you know what the fuck am I doing trying to think about selling this Stag? Bloody thing's got me hooked on its little finger. That was a bit burpy, sorry about that. Favourite road and why? Not the M25. It is not the M25. It's a tricky one. For me, it's going to be Snake Pass, but it's going to be Snake Pass in 1989. Snake Pass runs from Glossop to Sheffield. And I used to use that road twice a day, every day for about a year when I lived in Wilmslow and I was working in Sheffield at the Health and Safety Executive, contracting. installing computer kit and so forth. But that road had just about everything on it. It had the really, really steep climbs. It had the mountain edge, the ridge, it's not mountains, hill ridge, the Pennines. And then it went alongside the Ladyborough Reservoir, which is just absolutely stunningly gorgeous. And then across moorland and then up and into Sheffield. It's ruined now. It's utterly ruined. It's ruined by, you know, I don't know even know what the speed limit is up on that road now. I suspect it's probably 40 miles an hour with so much traffic calming measures. Because people have gone up there and gone absolutely fucking berserk on it. You know, and it's kind of spoiled it for everyone. To be honest, I went fucking berserk on that road. Not that there was timed trials, but kind of once you hit the national speed limit sign at Gloucester, there was an urgency to get to Sheffield for some reason. That's my favourite road. I'll put the road number under here, but it's a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful road. The other road that comes really close to that one is, well, there's two roads that come really close to it, but for different reasons. There's the Cat and Fiddle Pass that goes from Macclesfield over to Buxton, and that was a good road. I just quite like the long straights, the ridge at the top of the Pennines peaks. The other road that I really, really like, and I actually saw it a couple of weeks ago. We drove it with my wife in the pissing rain. It's the Rhine Nose and the Hard Knot Pass, end to end. So going from Coniston, driving over the top and down into basically where West Water is, it's a beautiful part of the world. And the road is driven slowly. Oh, Land Rovers out. The road needs to be driven slowly and considerately, and it's narrow, and there's a lot of traffic up there in peak season, but in winter time it's impassable. And it's a beautiful road to drive, but it's not a fast road. It's a road you need to think about, and it's a road that you stop and are absolutely wiped out by the views. Gorgeous. Favourite road and wine. This is a funny one. I had to read this one. Are farts funny? I mean, if that's not a rhetorical question. I can't think of any situation where a fart is not funny. I'm sure plenty of you and plenty of other people will be thinking, no, that's gross. There's something wrong with you. I'm not going to, by the way, I'm not going to. No. My sons will tell you, my friends will tell you, I've always got one in the breech, but it's not going to happen, not on this video, because I know I would offend people. But yes, they are very, 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 very funny. I arrived home a couple of days ago, and before I'd even got out of my stag, my son, and I said my only son that I've got at home still, because the other two have gone to Birmingham, basically came up to the car and broke wind as I opened the door. Okay, I was a little bit irritated, but, you know, ultimately it was, sir, I salute you. Now, got 5 minutes before we go to the pub. This one's a Courage Best Bitter. I've not had Courage Best Bitter in decades. Crafted with over 200 years of great British brewing history. Drink responsibly. I'm a very responsible person. Right, I'm polluting the glass, I know. Right, so Adrian, who helped me do the chassis work on Bob, helped me cut it all up. He wanted me, he was distraught as to why I didn't finish the story about my stag going down to Le Mans and breaking. And I did kind of start the story to a certain extent. Going to the pub in the series. He's going down the ramp, that's right. Pop, 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 pop. So, you've heard about the car overheating. If you haven't, it's in one of my, I think it's in the, I'll put the link to the video in the bottom here, but it was the one about the cooling system. Effectively what happened was that the journey was an absolute and utter bastard because the temperature gauge was running constantly against the red or in the red. The car eventually overheated after sitting in traffic for 3 hours, and I was not in the best frame of mind. My mates were taking the piss out of me, and you know, I loved the car, and it just let me down. Long and short of it, so when we got to the campsite, I just installed myself in a chair with my back to the car and consumed an enormous amount of stubbies. Stubbies are the little 25 cl Belgian beers that you get. We prefer the 33, the 33 as the brand of choice. It's got to be chilled, nothing worse than warm lager. But anyway, so I kind of started consuming this, and there was a couple of other chaps down there, good, good friends, very much into their engineering and so forth. And they started, what's going wrong with it? Don't give a fuck. Honestly, I don't want to even think about the bastard car. So it was the next morning I got up, and the lads were kind of like, "Come on, let's get the bonnet open, Richard. Let's have a look and see what's going wrong with this thing." And so we. I mean, the long and short, it's a whole series of photographs. I can't remember exactly what was going on, because one of the things when you go to Le Mans, big boys Le Mans, this is not the kind of historic stuff. No, big boys, fat boy Le Mans. Lots of shenanigans and frivolity going on there, I tell you. And yeah, it probably, whether I stopped drinking from the night before or whether I started up again, because it was like, 10:30 and it's a decent time to start drinking. So I was on the stubbies, and we started pulling the car apart. So radiator came out first and foremost. Adrian, who mentioned just now, backflushed the radiator and got a good handful of Turkish delight out of it, which is unfortunate. It's one of the byproducts of the seal head gasket failure solution. Blew the head gasket on my Stag a couple of years before. Lobbed it in there, it didn't work. I didn't bother getting my money back, because you have to jump through fucking hoops backwards while juggling poodles in order to get your money back. So fuck it, I just put it down to experience. And then the engine needed a complete rebuild, because when I pulled the heads off, the studs were seized in the block, and then when I pulled the crank out, it wasn't hardened and it was supposed to have been. And yeah, I learned an awful lot about Stags on that particular episode. But even though I backflushed the system a couple of times, that steel seal never ever had got to the point where it bunged up the leading edge of the radiator. Now, I still don't think it had bunged up the leading edge of the radiator. I just think it had compromised it slightly. So we did that. We pulled the thermostats out, and then I got into a lengthy debate with Matt. Hello, Matt. About whether I should just run the car without a thermostat. Now, I know, and any other Triumph Stag owners will know, that the little foot on the end of the thermostat stops the internal bypass. And if you take the thermostat out, then even when the engine's up to temperature, the water will continue to bypass the radiator, and it's not a good thing. You don't want to be doing that. Anyway, he nagged and nagged and nagged and nagged and nagged. Eventually I thought, fuck it, let's just leave the room. But I did have another thermostat with me. We did test in a pan of boiling water. Both opened up. Great. So the thermostats were okay. Distributor came out. No, I didn't take the distributor out because I didn't have a strobe with me, and no one else near us had a strobe, oddly enough, on a drinking lads weekend. And so I dismantled the distributor, but leaving the distributor body in its base plate, and that meant I had to keep taking off the Piranha optic in the base plate, and also the chopper that sat on the shaft. Sorry. We checked the bob weights were working in the bottom of the distributor. We found that there was a problem with the vacuum advance mechanism. Fiddled and fucked around with it, did all this, taking apart, and eventually it all went back together again. But I'd forgotten to do something and had to take the chopper off just one last time on the top of the distributor, and of course I broke one of the vanes off it. And the chopper has 8 vanes on it, and the idea is every time it breaks the optic sensor by sweeping through it as the distributor goes round, it sends a signal back to the coil saying, "Spark, please." And the coil then sends it to the centre of the distributor cap, and the rotor distributes it around. Got some excitement on my phone there. Distributor cap, and the rotor then distributes it down to the particular plug that it needs to be delivered to. Of course, having broken one of these choppers off, I'm now running a V7. So I'm thinking, oh, bollocks to this. I really fucking had enough of the poxy fucking bastard arsehole car. And just sunk into the depths of despair, thinking I'm going to have to get relayed home from this, because we had the bit, but we could. Matt came up with a solution, and I'm going to have to insert the picture, because the part's been up on the wall up there for about 4 years, hanging on a nail, and it's disappeared. And I think the wind's picked it up and blown it into the back of the barn. But here's a photograph of what Matt did. So, just in case you don't recognise it, Matt realised that he can actually use his pocket penknife to cut a slice of metal out of his Stella tin, his beer of choice, and use some araldite to glue it onto the underside of the chopper unit, and we actually ended up back again with 8 firing positions on the chopper using a Steadicam. Matt, you're a fucking genius, boy. I didn't mean boy. Matt, you're a fucking genius. Anyway, the funny thing about that whole event was that it kind of, huge campsite. This is in Beaujour campsite at Le Mans on the infield, just up near the Porsche curves. We became a bit of a legend in that campsite, field stripping a bloody Triumph Stag engine. I mean, we only went to the inlet and the bloody cooling systems. It wasn't, you know, an epic strip down. But people were kind of like, you know, they were quite amused by all this. Oh, there's noise over there. Oh, do you mind? It became a bit of a kind of, you know, people will come over. You got it running yet? No, I fucking haven't. I'll tell you one thing that did happen throughout the entire debacle of me trying to get this car working. My mate Chris, you're a smashing chap and all that, but Chris had a fair few beers, and his only contribution to this whole thing, and Chris used to race rallycross many years ago, raced rallycross, and knows his stuff. So I just think it was just, Chris was just seeing how far he could push me. And if he'd said, you want to put a Rover V8 in there once, he must have said it 843 fucking times. And it was the 843rd time that I might have been somewhat dismissive of his suggestions. Oh, well, I was only having a laugh. Poor Chris. Not quite finished with beer yet. So, I suppose we've run out of questions. I can talk about Le Mans. So Le Mans is one of those things that Adrian has been quite popular in this video. Hello, Adrian. Adrian and myself decided we wanted to do Le Mans, and it was a bit of a weird one really, because originally I was just going to go with Adrian in his car, and then Adrian wanted to take his dad, and he wanted me to install me in the back of a Capri 2-litre automatic. You see the fucking size of me, it won't go happen. So I kind of like thought, well, do you know, I just really don't fancy that. So I ended up persuading my dad and my brother that they wanted to go to Le Mans. Driving my dad's, there's a different story on this. I will come back to this story in a future beer and bollocks. But my dad had a BX GTI Citroen as a company car, automatic. I will tell you about that story one day. But anyway, we got on the ferry at Portsmouth. We booked it all up, got the ferry at Portsmouth, and drank like fish. And it got to the point, insert photograph here, my brother and my father. That I thought, do you know, someone needs to drive when we get to France in a couple of hours' time. I hadn't actually had that much, which is uncharacteristic of me. I think I probably realised already that these two were going to get absolutely slaughtered. I would end up driving the car in France. So, yeah, we landed in, I think it was Le Havre we landed at. Absolutely no idea where we were going. No map, no anything, no sat-nav back in this 1991. And took off, and my brother and my father basically just fell asleep in the car. Absolute load of no good whatsoever. So I set off down the road, and eventually I kind of pulled into a petrol station, thinking maybe I could buy a map or something. You know, the French are like, boo, when you try and explain this in your schoolboy French. Very helpful, the French in northern France. This chap in a Marcos, I think it was a 3-litre V6 Marcos, turned up. Spot a bother, old chap, that kind of thing, you know. And I said, yeah, you're off to Le Mans, are you? Yes, he said. I said, oh, I've got no idea where I'm going. Do you mind if I follow you? Yes, no problem at all. Just follow me. Of course, he takes off down these route nationales at like 100 miles an hour. I mean, I kept up because it was a GTI, Citroen GTI. That's Nick. So yeah, the GTI Citroen just tore off down these roads, and it was, because it was quite late when the ferry berthed. More or less drove through the night, and the sun was starting to come up, and we were still a way off, and the Marcos had disappeared. But by this time, I had a rough idea of where I was going, because you were picking up other British cars going in the same direction. You were picking up the occasional sign for Le Mans, toute direction, and all that kind of stuff. And I understood a lot about driving in France, in that if you don't know where you're going, you follow the toute direction sign, because there wasn't no real motorway network back in those days either, so you really were at the mercy of the route nationales, piling through these tiny little villages where there's 2 rows of houses either side of the road. And you're supposed to slow down to 50 kilometres an hour, and I thought that said 50 miles an hour, but shit happens. Anyway, it was just dawning, and I was just starting to feel a little bit comfortable about this journey. Do you know what? All is well in the world. And all of a sudden I heard someone bellowing in my ear, "Stop!" And the rear view mirror was full of my dad's face. What? Slammed on the brakes. He said, "I need a piss." Fucking hell. Right, okay. All right, Dad. So I found myself a little kind of road off. We actually turned, for some reason, although we were heading south, we turned off right on the road. Yeah, I suppose it would be on my side of the road, wouldn't it? Because we drive on the right in France. Drive on the wrong side in France. So I turned to the right and drove up this little farm track, which is just open to the world. My dad went off for a piss. My brother woke up. What are we doing? Dad needs a piss. So he had a piss. I had a piss. We did a barbecue. We had breakfast, bacon, eggs. Dad was still pissing. Anyway, we get down to Le Mans, and someone had told us that you need to follow the signs, follow the green signs, the garage vert. Follow those signs, and you get to the campsite on the infield. So we were driving around and around and around. No fucking idea where we were going. Absolute virgins to this. And we saw Jean-Claude standing there at the side of the road, directing traffic and stuff. Bonjour, monsieur. Où est le garage vert, s'il vous plaît? And he went like that to us. Fuck this. Just drove off. And eventually we just found it was about 200 yards up the road. But I probably need to do a complete beer and bollocks session about all of the shenanigans and the frivolity and the stupidity that's occurred on my various trips to Le Mans. I could probably get about 10 episodes out of it, of beer and bollocks. Just hours and hours and hours of stupid things we did. If you want to hear that kind of stuff, then, comment below. If you want to buy me more beer, use this link here. Give me a thumbs up, give me a thumbs down if you absolutely must. But ultimately, thank you for getting to the end of this video. I do appreciate it. Cheers.